some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them.
Joy Reid is out at MSNBC. Terry Moran has gone from ABC and now admitting
it's a bloodbath. It's a bloodbath on the left.
And the public interest means you can't be running a narrow partisan circus and still meeting your public interest obligations. It means you can't be engaging in a pattern of news distortion. We have a rule on the book that interprets a public interest standard that says news distortion is something that is prohibited.
Nexstar, as you noted, stood up and said, look, we have the license and we don't want to run this anymore. We don't think it serves the interests of our community. Sinclair did the same thing. So there's more work to go, but I'm very glad to see that America's broadcasters are standing up to serve the interests of their community. We don't just have this progressive foie gras coming out from New York and Hollywood.
It's one thing to have differing opinions, but it's another thing entirely to just say things that are false. And so that's something that we're looking into.
Rupert Murdoch, who has admitted they were lies and said he regretted it, has a special obligation to stop Tucker Carlson from going on tonight now that he's seen how he has perverted and slimed the truth.
ABC made the announcement Kimmel would indeed be taken off the air indefinitely. And this is just the latest chapter in Donald Trump's ongoing campaign to crack down on free speech, dominate the media, and essentially render the First Amendment meaningless.
Now Tucker can spend more time at home tanning his testicles and touching himself to that sexy green M&M. Sadly, he's probably not done poisoning old people's brains. The question now is, where will he do it next? Will he crawl back up Satan's fiery beehole from whence he came? We don't know. One of the most despicable mother Tuckers ever to appear on America.
Hypocrisy knows no bounds. Well, you kind of heard the clip already, right? In the intro, that President Trump was denying that the assassin of Charlie Kirk was one of their own. That led to an interview of FCC Chairman Brandon Carr by Benny Johnson, a big Trump supporter, big commentator, content creator, political commentator on social media. And he did an interview with the FCC chairman. Now, this is a little long, but it is the source material for the FCC and their approach to all this. So I think it's important that we listen to it. So I will speed it up a little bit, but I want us to have this as kind of a starting foundation. And he talks about how the FCC has actual authority here to do what would otherwise appear to be an unconstitutional infringement on free speech.
You know, when you look at the conduct that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible. As you've indicated, there are avenues here for the FCC. So there are some ways in which I need to be a little bit careful, because we could be called ultimately to be a judge on some of these claims that come up. But I don't think this is an isolated incident. I mean, you go back to Representative Swalwell, and he had a tweet out last week where he was saying that, emphasizing that Charlie Kirk's killer was a straight white male from a Republican family that voted for Donald Trump. In some quarters, there's a very concerted effort to try to lie to the American people about the nature, as you indicate, of one of the most significant, newsworthy public interest acts that we've seen in a long time. And what appears to be an action by Jimmy Kimmel to play into that narrative that this was somehow a MAGA or Republican motivated person. If that's what happened here with his conduct, that is really, really sick. And I've been very clear from the moment that I have become chairman of the FCC. I want to reinvigorate the public interest. And what people don't understand is that the broadcasters, and you've gotten this right, are entirely different than people that use other forms of communication. They have a license granted by us at the FCC, and that comes with it an obligation to operate in the public interest. And we can get into some ways that we've been trying to reinvigorate the public interest and some changes that we've seen. But frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead. Air is retiring. Joy Reid is out at MSNBC. Terry Moran has gone from ABC and now admitting
it's a bloodbath. It's a bloodbath on the left.
That they are biased. CBS has now made some commitments to us that they're going to return to more fact-based journalism. And so I think you see some lashing out from people like Kimmel, who are frankly talentless and are looking for ways to get attention. But their grip on the narrative is slipping. That doesn't mean that it's still not important to hold in the public interest standard. That's what we're going to have to do.
So we did elucidate and enumerate a number of statutes that could be used against ABC. If you would, Mr. Chairman, would you just explain for us what broadcasting in the public interest means? I don't think most people understand actually the depth of how important it is that ABC, NBC, CBS have these gratuitous broadcast privileges granted to them by the American taxpayer.
Yeah, the right way to sort of explain this to people so they understand it is in the media landscape as relevant here, there's two main buckets of actors. One, you've got what we call national programmers. So that's what Comcast is, Comcast NBC. That's what Disney is, Disney ABC. They're the ones that effectively create and produce these shows. They then provide those shows to individually licensed TV stations. And those TV stations are in the main owned by independent companies, independent from Comcast and Disney. But Disney and Comcast both own some televisions themselves. So start from the idea that you have national programmers that create the show, including the Kimmel show, and then they're given to and distributed over licensed TV stations. It's the licensed TV stations that have the public interest standard, including those TV stations that Comcast and Disney own. So FCC regulatory action focuses on those individual stations. And one thing that we're trying to do is to empower those local stations to serve their own communities. And the public interest means you can't be running a narrow partisan circus and still meeting your public interest obligations. It means you can't be engaging in a pattern of news distortion. We have a rule on the book that interprets a public interest standard that says news distortion is something that is prohibited. Likewise, we have a rule that addresses broadcast hoaxes. And so, again, over the years, the FCC has stepped back from enforcing it. And I don't think it's been to the benefit of anybody. Just look at the credibility of these legacy media. It's absolutely through the floor. They used to be able to say at least they were more trustworthy than Congress, but now they're even less trustworthy than Congress. And so I think as a business matter for them, something has to change. And at the FCC, we need to reinvigorate this. So again, there's actions that we can take on licensed broadcasters. And frankly, I think that it's really sort of past time that a lot of these licensed broadcasters themselves push back on Comcast and Disney and say, listen, we are going to preempt. We are not going to run Kimmel anymore until you straighten this out, because we licensed broadcaster are running the possibility of fines or license revocations from the FCC if we continue to run content that ends up being a pattern of news distortion. So I think, again, Disney needs to see some change here, but the individual licensed stations that are taking their content, it's time for them to step up and say this, garbage, to the extent that that's what comes down the pipe in the future, isn't something that we think serves the needs of our local communities. But this sort of status quo is obviously not acceptable where we are.
You believe that what Jimmy Kimmel said rises to the level of news distortion?
Look, again, the FCC could be called upon to be an ultimate judge in that, but at this point, I think it's clear. It appears to be clear that you can make a strong argument that this is sort of an intentional effort to mislead the American people about a very core, fundamental fact, a very important matter. At the end of the day, if we do get called upon to cast a vote on this, Disney will have a chance to put in their arguments and explain it. But this is a very, very serious issue right now for Disney.
So this is just one of the regulations that could be used to strip ABC and Sinclair of their broadcast license for propagating the kind of patent falsehoods, patent lies that Kimmel was propagating. Broadcast hoaxes. No licensee of any broadcast station shall broadcast false information concerning a crime or catastrophe if the licensee knows this information is false, and certainly it was well known at the time that Kimmel spoke that this was a person on the left. I mean, just use your common sense. Did someone MAGA assassinate Charlie Kirk, one of the largest, if not the largest MAGA public personalities? Does that make any sense in the world? 2, that it's foreseeable that the broadcasting information will cause substantial public harm. And 3, broadcasting the information does in fact correctly cause substantial public harm. Any programming accompanied by a disclaimer is released from this. For purposes of this rule, public harm must begin immediately, cause direct and actual damage to property or to health or safety of the general public, or diversion of law enforcement or other public health and safety authorities from their duties. Does that not happen if people are being misdirected on the group coordinating behind this assassination of Charlie Kirk? And of course, there are public interest regulations for the FCC as well. You need to be propagating broadcasting information that's actually in the public interest and more. And now I got a little bit of comment here from the same FCC guy we just heard from on Hannity. This one's only about a minute after Jimmy Kimmel was fired. So let's see what he has to say about that.
Yeah, broadcasters are different than any other form of communication, including here. We're on cable right now. Fox News doesn't have an FCC license. CNN doesn't. But ABC, CBS, NBC, those broadcast stations do. And with that license comes a unique obligation to operate in the public interest. And over the years, the FCC walked away from enforcing that public interest obligation. I don't think we're better off as a country for it. But look, President Trump ran directly at these legacy broadcast outlets, and he exposed them to these market forces. And a lot of these affiliate groups said, to your point, we're tired of carrying this stuff. Late night shows, something's gone seriously awry there. They went from going for applause, from laugh lines to applause lines. They went from being court jesters that would make fun of everybody in power to being court clerics and enforcing a very narrow political ideology. And Nexstar, as you noted, stood up and said, look, we have the license and we don't want to run this anymore. We don't think it serves the interests of our community. Sinclair did the same thing. So there's more work to go, but I'm very glad to see that America's broadcasters are standing up to serve the interests of their community. We don't just have this progressive foie gras coming out from New York and Hollywood.
That's part of what political winning looks like, folks, that this guy is our FCC chairman. And by the way, I hear all this kind of stuff like this from the left right now. Where are all the free speech absolutists now? Well, first of all, there's never been absolute free speech. There's lots of speech that is not protected by the First Amendment. Speech that incites violence, imminent violence, not protected by the First Amendment. Most commercial speech, highly regulated, not protected by the First Amendment. Even the most highly protected speech, which is political speech is highly regulated in terms of how you can finance, who will speak on behalf of your political views. Defamation, not politically protected. National security secrets, you don't just get to say them and then say that's First Amendment protected speech. There's lots of speech not protected. Where are all these free speech absolutists now? Also, the FCC in particular exists to manage and control the airwaves. There are limited airwaves. We have to avoid interference with broadcasts one from another. The FCC was created to organize and control all of that, and part of that has always been to limit speech. If you're of a certain age, you remember when cable TV first started, and they could show movies that had boobs on them. Boobs, exposed boobs. That was a big deal. You couldn't show that on network television. So the FCC's always been controlling the kind of content you can say. And by the way, Kimmel has not been silenced. Kimmel now has exactly the same First Amendment rights as I do, and you do, and every American citizen does. There's nothing holding Kimmel back from starting a YouTube channel just like this one, starting a podcast like the rest of us have done. That's more than the social media platforms allowed President Trump to do when he was a sitting president. They canceled him on all the social media platforms. Welcome to the party, pal. Welcome to your own rules. Here's Barack Obama, perhaps one of the biggest liars to ever exist in American society. He says, well, when I was president, in the aftermath of tragedies, my response was not to go after my political opponents. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? He sicked the IRS on his political opponents. The IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, actually had to apologize for giving extra scrutiny to organizations with the names Tea Party or Patriot, seeking standard tax-exempt status as political action committees that were opposed to the president running the IRS. He sicked the IRS on his political opponents. What an utter shitbag Barry Soetoro Barack Obama is. And of course, everyone on the left does exactly the same kind of lying. AOC, when she was in charge, when her party was in charge, when the progressive fascist demons were in charge, talks about how they're going to have to figure out how to rein in the media, rein in Fox News in order to get them, the media, to obey her.
You know, I do think that several members of Congress in some of my discussions have brought up media literacy because that is a part of what happened here. And we're going to have to figure out how we rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation.
Look at that.
It's one thing to have differing opinions, but it's another thing entirely to just say things that are false.
Ho!
And so that's something that we're looking into. You know,
they're looking into it. They're looking into it. And what about good old Chuck Schumer? Good old Chuck Schumer. What did he have to say? When he was in charge, when his party was in charge, and he didn't like what what Tucker Carlson was saying on Fox News.
These lies continue tonight. Rupert Murdoch, who has admitted they were lies and said he regretted it, has a special obligation to stop Tucker Carlson from going on tonight now that he's seen how he has perverted and slimed the truth, and from letting him go on again and again and again. Not because their views deserve such opprobrium, but because our democracy depends on it.
Our democracy depends on it. By the way, again, Fox News, not a broadcast program. They're a cable news program. So there's no governmental interest in controlling what Fox News puts out in terms of a broadcast, because they don't broadcast over the airwaves. Chris Hayes, one of the biggest pieces of garbage, on Kimmel getting fired, and then on Tucker Carlson getting fired by Fox. I wonder if he has the same views on both of those events. I expect not.
ABC made the announcement Kimmel would indeed be taken off the air indefinitely. And this is just the latest chapter in Donald Trump's ongoing campaign to crack down on free speech, dominate the media, and essentially render the First Amendment meaningless. So it was for the journeyman cable news host Tucker Carlson, just fired from his third network. He believed he could say anything, no matter how vile, no matter how disgusting, no matter how offensive, no matter how dehumanizing or belittling. And if you act like a sociopath over and over and over and over, you will become unpopular on the national stage. That's just like a basic principle. Over time, probably not going to work out well for you in the long run. Eventually, people will be rightly offended, disgusted.
I bet Chris Hayes' boyfriend loved that segment. And of course, it wasn't just random people on the left glorifying over the firing of Tucker Carlson. That group included none other than Jimmy Kimmel himself.
Fox News has severed bow ties with Tucker Carlson. After all these years, they are parting ways, which means he was fired. I mean, that's really what parting ways means. Tucker couldn't be reached for comment. He's already on a plane to Moscow to meet with his manager. But what a shock. I mean, what an absolutely delightful shock this is. Now Tucker can spend more time at home tanning his testicles and touching himself to that sexy green M&M. Sadly, he's probably not done poisoning old people's brains. The question now is, where will he do it next? Will he go to OAN? Will he go to Newsmax? Will he crawl back up Satan's fiery beehole from whence he came? We don't know. One of the most despicable mother Tuckers ever to appear on America.
Hypocrisy knows no bounds. And of course, the left has been waging cancel culture war on the right for ages, on both members of the right who are high profile and just ordinary nobodies. Ordinary nobodies who should not be on anyone's political vengeance radar. But of course, if you're the left, everybody not of your tribe is an enemy that must be destroyed.